I never thought a simple delivery job would change the course of my life forever. At the time, I was just an ordinary man, working long hours to make ends meet. I drove a van for a courier company, hauling packages and documents across the city. Nothing glamorous, nothing exciting. But sometimes life hides extraordinary events in the most ordinary routines, and that's exactly what happened to me one Thursday morning. It started with a package, an unremarkable brown box, sealed with heavy tape and addressed to a name I'd never heard before, Professor Adrian Whitmore. I remember thinking the name sounded old-fashioned, almost like someone pulled out of a history book. What caught my attention wasn't the name, though, but the pickup location. It wasn't a regular office or a company. It was an old, abandoned library on the edge of the city, boarded up for years. When I got there, the place looked deserted, just as I expected. The windows were covered in dust and grime, some of them cracked, and weeds had grown wild around the steps. I knocked anyway, more out of habit than hope. To my shock, the door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with streaks of white in his dark hair, wearing a long coat that looked too heavy for the mild weather. His eyes, piercing blue, studied me as though he could see every detail of who I was. "You have something for me," he said, his voice deep and calm. I nodded, handed over the scanner, and watched him sign. His handwriting was elegant, almost like calligraphy, but his hand trembled slightly as he scribbled his name. He took the package, clutching it close to his chest, and before I could even wish him a good day, he leaned closer and whispered something I will never forget. "Don't tell anyone you were here." Then the door shut. That should have been the end of it, just another strange encounter in my delivery rounds. But it wasn't. Later that evening, when I finished work, I found a slip of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. It had only one sentence written on it: "If you want the truth, follow the package." I froze, staring at the note. My heart pounded in my chest. Who wrote this? What truth? And what did it have to do with that old professor and his mysterious delivery? At first, I told myself to forget it. I had bills to pay, a life to live, and getting mixed up in other people's business never ends well. But curiosity has a way of digging its claws into you. And that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the strange man, his trembling hands, the way he clutched that box like it was the most precious thing in the world. By morning, I'd made my decision. I needed to know what was inside that package. So, the next day, I went back to the old library. The front door was locked tight, but I managed to circle around to the back, where I found a cracked window just large enough to squeeze through. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and shafts of light pierced through the gaps in the boarded windows. Bookshelves stood in long rows, their wood splintered, their books rotting with age. The smell of paper and mildew hung heavy. I crept deeper into the library, every step echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. That's when I heard voices. I stopped and pressed myself against the wall, listening. "We can't let it leave the city. If it falls into the wrong hands, it already has." Another voice interrupted, sharp and urgent. "Whitmore's involved, which means we're running out of time." I peeked around the corner and saw two men in suits standing near a table. On the table sat the package I had delivered. It was open now, and inside, I glimpsed a strange, black-bound book with symbols embossed in gold. The men weren't touching it. They stood back as though it radiated danger. One of them finally closed the box again and said, "We move tonight. No one can know about this." My pulse raced. I stumbled backward, trying not to make a sound, but my foot knocked against a loose board. The sharp crack echoed through the library. "Who's there?" one of the men shouted. Panic surged through me. I bolted toward the nearest door, heart hammering, footsteps pounding behind me. Somehow, I managed to slip out through a side exit and sprint down the alley until I was far enough to catch my breath. But that night changed everything. I wasn't just a delivery driver anymore. I was a witness to something big, something people were willing to hide at any cost. And deep down, I knew there was no going back. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound outside my window made me jolt awake, convinced someone had followed me from the library. I kept replaying what I had seen, the black-bound book, the men in suits, their whispers about it being too dangerous. What kind of book needed to be hidden? And why would a professor in a forgotten library be connected to it? By morning, my fear had twisted into something stronger. Determination. I couldn't just let it go. The note left on my van, "Follow the package," felt less like a suggestion and more like a warning. Whoever left it knew something, maybe even wanted me to uncover what was going on. So, I went digging. The delivery slip from yesterday still sat in my bag, with the recipient's name, Professor Adrian Whitmore. A quick search online told me Whitmore was a historian who once taught at a major university. He specialized in ancient texts and forgotten civilizations. But 10 years ago, he vanished from academia altogether. Rumors said he'd been dismissed for obsession with unverified manuscripts. Others hinted at mental breakdowns. Whatever the truth was, the man now lived in a rotting library, guarding a book that terrified even well-dressed men in suits. I decided I had to see him again. Returning to that library in daylight felt easier, though my nerves buzzed with every step. I knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. I waited, then knocked. Again. Finally, the door opened just a crack, and Whitmore's pale, tired eyes peered out. "You shouldn't be here," he said sharply. "I need to know what's going on," I blurted. "I saw the men last night. I saw the book." His expression changed instantly, fear mixed with anger. He yanked me inside, slammed the door, and locked it. "You don't know what you've stumbled into," he whispered. "If they saw you, your life is already in danger." I swallowed hard. "Then tell me why. Tell me what's inside that book." For a long moment, he just stared at me, as if weighing whether I could handle the truth. Finally, he motioned for me to follow him deeper into the library. We walked through shadowed aisles until we reached a back room lit by a single lamp. On the desk lay the black-bound book, its golden symbols shimmering faintly even in the dim light. "This," he said softly, "is called the Chronicle of Ashes. It is not just a book, it's a record of secrets too dangerous for the public to ever see. Wars have been fought over less." I leaned closer, tracing the strange markings on the cover with my eyes. They looked like a mix of languages I didn't recognize, sharp lines and curves intertwined. "What kind of secrets?" I asked. Whitmore's voice dropped. "Maps, names, codes, accounts of things governments and powerful families have buried for centuries. It holds proof of betrayals, hidden treasure, even assassinations disguised as accidents. If it falls into the wrong hands, chaos will follow." My stomach tightened. This was bigger than anything I imagined. But before I could ask more, a loud crash echoed through the library. Both of us froze. "They found us," Whitmore hissed. The professor grabbed the book and shoved it into my hands. "Run!" he shouted. I didn't have time to argue. The back door burst open, and the men in suits stormed in. One of them yelled, "Stop him!" as I bolted through the nearest hallway. Adrenaline surged through me as I sprinted past collapsing shelves and broken glass, clutching the heavy book tight against my chest. I crashed through a side exit and into the daylight, lungs burning, legs pumping. Behind me, footsteps thundered closer. I darted into the streets, weaving through alleys, until finally I lost them in the maze of the city. When I stopped, gasping for breath, I looked down at the book in my arms. My hands trembled. I hadn't wanted this. I wasn't a spy or a hero. I was just a delivery driver. But now I held something worth killing for. I needed answers. I went to the only person I trusted, my childhood friend, Daniel, a journalist known for chasing stories no one else dared touch. When I showed up at his apartment, sweaty and pale, clutching the book, he raised an eyebrow. "What did you get yourself into this time?" he asked. I told him everything. From the delivery to the note to the chase through the library. Daniel's face grew serious. When I handed him the book, he whistled softly. "This is huge. If it's real, it's the kind of thing people would kill to keep buried." "They already tried," I muttered. Daniel suggested we scan a few pages, just enough to verify what Whitmore claimed. Carefully, we opened the book. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in symbols and diagrams, maps of places I didn't recognize. At first glance, it seemed impossible to decipher, but Daniel pointed out details that chilled me. A map that looked eerily like modern Europe, marked with dates centuries apart. Names of leaders, some crossed out with symbols beside them, almost like a ledger of fate. "This isn't just history," Daniel whispered. "It's a blueprint." Before we could dig deeper, his phone buzzed. He frowned. "Unknown number." He answered cautiously. A voice crackled through the speaker. "You have something that belongs to us. If you want to live, bring it to the docks by midnight, alone." Then the line went dead. My chest tightened. They knew. They always knew. Daniel looked at me, wide-eyed. "You realize this is a trap, right?" "Of course it's a trap," I said. "But what choice do we have? If we don't show up, they'll find us anyway." The rest of the day passed in a blur of planning. Daniel insisted on coming with me, no matter the risk. As night fell, we drove toward the docks, the black-bound book wrapped tightly in an old jacket on the seat between us. The city lights faded behind us, and the water stretched out like a dark mirror. Ahead, when we arrived, the place was deserted. Fog rolled across the docks, muffling our footsteps. Then, out of the shadows, men emerged, at least 5 of them, all in black suits. One stepped forward, the same man I had seen in the library, his cold eyes fixed on me. "Hand it over," he said. I tightened my grip on the jacket. My heart pounded. Something inside me screamed not to give it up. Not yet. But before I could decide, headlights flared behind us. Another car screeched to a halt, and armed figures poured out, not more men in suits, but uniformed officers. "Federal agents," a voice barked. "Drop your weapons!" Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, the clash of shadows against fog. Daniel grabbed my arm. "Run!" We sprinted toward the warehouse at the edge of the docks, bullets whining past us. My lungs burned as we ducked behind crates, the book still in my hands. "This is insane," Daniel gasped. "What do we do now?" I looked at the book, then at him. "We finish what we started. We find out the truth, no matter what it takes." The warehouse air reeked of rust and seawater. Daniel and I crouched low, trying to steady our breathing as gunfire cracked outside. My hands gripped the book so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "Do you realize what this means?" Daniel whispered. "It's not just some group of men after us. It's governments, too. Everyone wants this thing." I nodded, though my heart pounded with a different fear. If the book held what Whitmore claimed, truths hidden from the world for centuries, it was more dangerous than any weapon. Whoever controlled it could rewrite history itself. Suddenly, footsteps echoed inside the warehouse. A man in a black suit stepped into the light, his gun raised. Daniel tensed beside me, but before the man could fire, another voice barked from the shadows. "Stand down." A woman emerged, wearing a federal agent's jacket, her weapon drawn. The suited man hesitated for a split second. It was all the time she needed. With practiced precision, she fired once, dropping him instantly. She turned to us. "You need to come with me, now." Daniel looked suspicious. "And just who are you?" "Special Agent Carter," she replied quickly. "I've been tracking this book for 3 years. If you want to survive the night, trust me." I hesitated, but the chaos outside told me we didn't have time to argue. We followed her deeper into the warehouse, weaving through rusted crates until we reached a hidden exit. She led us to an unmarked SUV, parked in the shadows, then drove us out of the docks with no headlights. For a long time, none of us spoke. My pulse thudded in my ears. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. You've been tracking the book? Then tell us what it really is. Why are people willing to kill for it? Agent Carter's eyes stayed on the road. Because it's the most complete record of suppressed history ever compiled. It contains evidence of government conspiracies, assassinations, stolen wealth, even rituals carried out by secret societies. Every powerful family and organization you've ever heard of has something to lose if this becomes public. And Whitmore? I asked. He told me it was too dangerous. Carter's expression hardened. Whitmore used to be one of us. He believed the book should be hidden forever, locked away where no one could find it. But he underestimated how far others would go to retrieve it. That's why I've been chasing shadows for years until you stumbled into this mess. Her words hit me like a stone. If I hadn't delivered that package, maybe none of this would have spiraled out of control. But now, here we were, caught between groups that wanted the book for power and those who wanted it destroyed. What happens now? I asked quietly. She glanced at me in the rearview mirror. That depends on you. You're holding it. You decide. Her words sank deep into me. Me? A delivery driver with no training, no power, no plan I had to decide the fate of something that could shatter the world. We reached a safe house just outside the city, a small cabin tucked away in the woods. Inside, Carter locked the doors, then motioned for us to sit at the table. The book lay between us, its golden markings glowing faintly in the dim lamplight. You should know, Carter said. There are 3 options. 1, you hand it over to me, and I ensure it disappears forever, beyond the reach of anyone. 2, you go public with it, expose everything, and accept the chaos that will follow. Or 3, you keep it hidden yourself, though that means living the rest of your life as a target. Daniel leaned forward. Why should we trust you? How do we know you're not just another piece of this puzzle, working for people who want it silenced? Carter didn't flinch. You don't. But sooner or later, you'll realize that keeping it in your hands is a death sentence. I stared at the book. Its weight felt heavier than steel. Yet it wasn't just the paper and ink, it was the responsibility. What would happen if I gave it up? What would happen if I didn't? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone at the table, the Chronicle of Ashes in front of me. I opened it, turning page after page. The symbols blurred before my eyes, but then I noticed something I hadn't before, a passage written in clear English, hidden near the back. It wasn't a map or a code. It was a warning. The truth is not a flame to be admired, but a fire that consumes. To release it is to burn the world. To bury it is to suffocate hope. Choose wisely, for no choice is without consequence. The words sent chills down my spine. Whitmore had been right. The book was dangerous. But Daniel was right too. The world deserved to know. And Carter? Maybe she was right as well. Maybe some truths were too heavy for people to carry. By morning, I made my decision. I told Daniel and Carter we needed to go back into the city. They didn't like it, but they followed. We drove to Daniel's office, a cramped space above a printing shop. While he prepared his equipment, I laid the book on the desk. You're sure about this? He asked. I nodded. We scan it. Not the whole thing, just enough. Enough to prove it's real, but not enough to hand the whole world a weapon. Daniel hesitated, then got to work. Page by page, he captured the most damning pieces, the maps, the names, the records that proved beyond doubt that history had been manipulated. Carter watched silently, her arms crossed. But she didn't stop us. When we finished, Daniel uploaded the files to a secure drive. It's done. Now what? Now, I said. We vanish. We split the files into multiple encrypted copies, hidden in places no one would expect. Trusted journalists, anonymous servers, even sealed envelopes mailed to distant addresses. Not enough to reveal everything, but enough to ensure the truth couldn't be buried completely. The original book? I made my choice that night. Carter and I drove to the edge of the ocean cliffs, the wind howling around us. I held the Chronicle of Ashes one last time, feeling its weight, its power. Then, without another word, I hurled it into the crashing waves below. The sea swallowed it whole. Carter stood beside me, silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "You may have just saved more lives than you'll ever know." But I didn't feel like a savior. I felt empty, haunted, because deep down, I knew the book wasn't gone forever. Someone, someday, would find it again. And when they did, the cycle would start all over. Daniel's story went live 2 weeks later. The files we released caused a storm just enough to shake people's faith in the narratives they'd been fed, but not enough to collapse governments or plunge nations into chaos. Some called it conspiracy. Others called it truth. For us, it was survival. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night, convinced I hear footsteps outside my window. Maybe it's paranoia, or maybe it's the shadows, still hunting. Because once you've held the truth in your hands, once you've seen how fragile the world really is, you never sleep the same again.